Yo, what up? It's your boy, Mr. E. And today we're going to talk a little bit about balanced budgets. We did talk a little bit about this in the last video, but I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper on what it means to have a balanced budget. And we're going to take a look at a couple problems that you might see in your classwork this week, okay? So, a balanced budget is any budget in which the amount of money that someone receives is at least equal to the amount of money that they spend. So, when we have a balanced budget, our income is equivalent to our expenses. We want both sides to be even, not going one way or the other. Perfectly balanced as all things should be, like my boy Thanos says, rocking the purple for Thanos, you know what I'm saying? But we want to look to have a balanced budget. So you don't want to have too many expenses and that you can't pay for them because then that will be bad news bears for you. But you also don't want to have way too much income and you're not actually doing things with that money to either help other people out with donations or help grow your savings or help invest into the stocks or in a house. So you want to have it where your income and your expenses are pretty similar, okay? So let's take a look at a couple problems, okay? So Ishan recorded his budget for the next month in order to plan his expenses. So this is Ishan's net income. So that means after all the taxes and all of the benefits and insurance gets taken out. And this is what he spends. So after recording his expenses, Ishan noticed that his budget was not balanced. What step could he take to balance his expected budget? So this is a problem that a lot of people have. You take a look at the things that you need and you write down how much everything's going to cost you for a month. And then you have the realization, oh my goodness, this is not going to work out. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to add up all his expenses and we're going to see what the total expenses are. Okay. So let's add these two things together. So 110 plus 90, that would give us 200, right? When I add 250 plus 200, that gives me 450. Then I know 15 plus 130 would get me 145. So when I add these up, his total expenses is going to be $595. So this is actually pretty good. We're not too far off of what his income is. So we need to think about some things that Ishan could do to balance out his budget. So something that I noticed right away is that Ishan spends a lot of money on his entertainment, which entertainment is important. But if there's something that has to go on this list, I would probably say the entertainment would go first. You could probably take a little bit out of everything here and there, but I mean, the food and gas, that's definitely something we need. Clothes are definitely something you need. Movies and entertainment, you can find different ways. I mean, I think all of us in this quarantine time have found many different ways to entertain ourselves. So, what I think would be a good idea, since he only is about $45 off, instead of spending this much amount of money on that, he could spend $85 on that. Okay. And if he spends $85 on that, that would make it where it would be that perfect balance that we're looking for. So he could spend a little bit less on entertainment, still have everything else where he needs to be. And $85 of entertainment, you're still going to get a lot of good entertainment on that. And that way his budget is balanced. Now, that's not the only way to do it. There's plenty of ways to do it. We could take movies off the list altogether. We could spend less on clothes. Another way to balance your budget is to earn more income. Maybe he asks his boss for a raise. Maybe he applies for another job or does something on the side to get his side hustle on, okay? But that's just one way that Ishan could balance his budget is taking $45 off of his entertainment, all right? So that's one way we can balance budgets. Let's take a look at another problem. All right. Shamar recorded his monthly expenses in a table. Shamar's net income this month is $2,581. How much money will Shamar be able to put away in his savings? All right, so this is a great question where we know how much his income is. We know how much he's spending on these other things, but we want to find out this amount right here. So basically what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add up all of his expenses, subtract that from his net income, and then figure out what's left over for his savings, okay? So this one's a little bit harder to do. I kind of eyeballed the last one, so we'll kind of stack these up. and get these going. I highly recommend when you do this, you just add one thing at a time. It makes it where there's less likely for you to make a mistake. But you guys are high quality students, and if you feel like you can stack a whole bunch of numbers on top of each other and add them, more power to you. Do you, boo? Okay. Do make sure your place values are all lined up properly. You're not getting crazy like that. 3 got a little crazy there for a second. Okay, so 5 plus 6 is 11, plus another 5 is 16, plus 9, that would give me 25. So 5 in the ones place, 2 comes up here. 2 plus 5 is 7, plus 2 is 9, 3 is 12. That would give us 19, that would give us 22. And how embarrassing would it be if I made a math error on one of these videos? Probably has already happened before. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7, plus 3 is 10, and then 1 plus 1 is 2. So his total expenses is $2,025, okay? So now what I'm gonna do to figure out how much he can put into his savings, I'm gonna subtract $2,025 from 2,581, because remember, that's his net income. That's how much money is actually going to his bank account, okay? So I can't take 5 away from 1, so I'm gonna borrow 1 from 8. Go next door, as Miss Morris says. 11 minus 5 would get us 6. 7 minus 2 would get us 5. 5 minus 0 would get us 5. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. So he can put $556 away for his savings, which I think is a great idea. Honestly, you should be trying to save at least 10% of your income, if not more. The more savings you have, the better your future is going to be. So putting a lot into your savings is definitely a good way to balance your budget, because it seems like he had a little bit more income than he had expenses. So it's always a good idea to put things into your savings if that's the case, okay? So hopefully going over a couple of these problems showed you guys how we can balance the budget. Remember, there's 2 sides of the coin here. You can always decrease your expenses to help make your budget more balanced, or you can increase your income. There's lots of different ways to do it, okay? One way I would think I might increase my income is becoming a YouTuber. I think I could make a lot more money doing this stuff, doing these videos. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't get any subscribers. All right, I went off on a rant. We love you guys. We miss you guys. We'll see you later. Bye. Yo, what up? It's your boy, Mr. E. And this week we are going to be talking about forms of payments. There are tons of forms of payment. You can use them in many different ways. And we're going to talk about specific types of those payments. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about cash and checks. So I think a lot of people know about cash, but I'll talk about it a little bit. It's legal tender, which means currency or coins that can be used to exchange goods, debt, or services. Checks are paper forms that people use to transfer money from one place to another. A check is a written order that instructs a bank to pay a specific amount of money from a specific checking account to a specific person or entity, for example, a store. So you notice with checks, it's like very, very specific, okay? So these are kind of the most basic forms of payment. They've been around forever, ever. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into these types of things, okay? So with cash is made out of paper, made out of metal, made out of materials like that. And we kind of use them every day. They're in our wallets, they're in our hands. We use them a lot, okay? Now, just because they're made out of paper, that does not mean money grows on trees. I know that's a kind of a popular saying, but you can't just go out in your backyard and get some trees and make some paper out of it and make money. That has to come from the government, okay? One thing that's positive about cash is a lot of places will actually give you a discount if you use cash. As you can see here, and you might have seen this, on a road trip with your parents, but gas stations will often offer a lower price than what you would have if you did it for credit. And the reason for that is cash, just you have that money, it's yours, it's done, there's nothing else you have to worry about. Sometimes with credit cards, you have to worry if like their credit card declines or if there's something shady going on, but cash, it's just once the money's in your hand, you have it. One place that might not accept cash would be like if you're on an airplane and your parents buying you like a drink or some snacks. They need that credit card because it has that traceable proof that there was a purchase made. Cash sometimes is a little bit harder to trace, okay? This is kind of like mixed. It can be a good thing or a bad thing. Cash, once you don't have any cash, you can't spend anymore. So if all I have is cash, if I have $100, once I spend that $100, I can't buy anything else. But that could be considered a good thing because some people don't have a lot of self-control with their money. So they set a certain amount of cash that they can spend on some things. That way they don't overspend. So you can kind of look at it on both sides of the coin. Get it? Another thing is if you lose cash, it's just gone. You can't lose your $20 bill, go up to the bank and be like, hey, I lost my $20 bill. They'll be like, okay, that stinks. You won't get it back. So it's gone. So you got to be very careful with your cash, especially, losing it, damaging it, or even getting it stolen. Like once that happens, it's done. Couple things about a check. In a check, your name and address will be up here. You write that specific person or company that you're writing the check to, the date, the check numbers, because that helps you keep track of how many checks you've written. You write the amount not only in number form, but in written form as well. You write what the check is for. It has some information from your bank account, and you have a signature. So it's a very detailed document. You have to write a lot of things in. You also want to be careful because you don't want to leave any space for someone to like write something in extra that you were not intending for it to be written. Like sometimes people will put like an extra zero and $100 turns into $1,000, and that's not good. So money from a check comes directly from your bank account, usually your checking account, and that's why they call it a checking account. So you write a check and that money will come directly out of your bank account. So however much money you have in your bank account, you can write it on a check and you can give it to somebody. Nice thing about a check is it's a very organized way to spend money or use money. You get a checkbook and you can actually balance your checkbook within. You can write like how much money you have in your checking account, write how many times you write checks, and it's really easy to keep track of. Also, underneath the checks you write, there's a thin piece of paper that kind of gives a receipt of what that check looks like so you can keep track of it better. A nice thing too is if you get a check or even give somebody a check and it gets lost, you can always rewrite the check. So there's no problem there. The only problem would be is if they cashed it already. Then if you've lost it, then it's just, if they cash it, it's done, okay? But if you lose a check, it's not like you lose that money. It's only gone once it's cashed, okay? There are a couple negatives about checks, though, is that a lot of places don't accept checks. They're kind of an old school form of payment. A lot of people get worried about checks doing something called bouncing. And if a check is bouncing, that means somebody wrote an amount for their check that they don't have. So let's say that William Fargo, who lives in Anywhere, USA, wrote this check for $46.73, but he only had $40 in his bank account, then the check would bounce. That means that person would not receive the payment, and then William Fargo would actually get an insufficient funds fee. And it's a mess for everybody. So a bounce check is not a good thing, and that's why a lot of places don't accept them. So now I'm going to list out some of the advantages and disadvantages. This isn't like the end all be all. These are just a couple that I feel are important. So here we go. So one advantage of a cash is it is very convenient. A lot of people use it. A lot of people want it. It's just easy to get out of your wallet, give it to somebody, and then your transaction's done. It's accepted almost everywhere. So you're not going to run into a lot of stores that are like, we're not going to take your cash. There are places like that, like we talked about with the airplanes, but almost everywhere will accept it. And it's just very quick. Once your transaction's done, you're not having to wait on anything. You're not having to have a couple days before it hits your bank account. Like it's yours. You have the money. Okay. Disadvantage: if you lose it, it's gone. You can get more, but it won't be that same value of what you got earlier. If it's damaged, it's gone. If you rip it, if you get it really wet, if it's damaged, that's gone. It's sometimes you'll have to deal with change. That's one thing that I don't like about cash is I don't like giving somebody a $20 bill and then getting back a 5, a 1, 3/4, 2 dimes, like all this. It's like, I don't want to keep up with all that stuff. It's kind of tough. Some advantages and disadvantages of checks. Institutions can trace for proof of payment. So it's really easy to trace checks, where with cash, it can be a little shady with that kind of stuff. You can write a very specific amount, so you don't have to get out dollars and quarters and pennies and dimes and all that stuff. You can just write the specific amount that you owe. And if you lose it, it can be replaced. It's not too tough to do that. Some disadvantages, though, is the withdrawal time from the account depends on the person cashing the check. An interesting thing that happened to me once is I wrote a friend a check and they didn't cash it right away. They didn't have to. They hadn't gone to the bank or whatever. And then I kind of forgot that I wrote them that check, but then they cashed it about a month later, and then I was completely not ready for that. And luckily, I did have enough money, but I was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that check. So it always depends on how that person and when they cash it. They're not accepted everywhere. A lot of places actually don't accept checks because they're worried about it bouncing. If a check bounces, if you write a bad check, you will get an insufficient funds fee, which basically they take away money from you for trying to give money that you didn't have. It's kind of complicated, but it's a fee that you definitely don't want to have to worry about. Okay. So these were just a few of the advantages and disadvantages of cash and checks. I think they're both great forms of payment. I use both of them. Maybe not every day, but I do use them from time to time. Talk to your parents more about these types of forms of payment. See what they like to use, if they enjoy using cash or checks, if they like using something else, because they are very good experts on financial literacy. All right. All right. Well, we miss you. We love you. And we'll see you later. Bye.